Good morning, everyone. This is Juliana Stratton, and I want to thank all of you for joining us on this call today. I want to first acknowledge that I fully recognize that these are really trying times for many of you, both personally and professionally. And I want to start my remarks by just saying that I hope that you and your loved ones are healthy and well. And I also want to acknowledge that when we have a call that is as large as it is today, and we think about the communities that we are all serving, it's just quite possibly more so likely the case that there are those on the call that have been personally touched by the COVID-19 pandemic with your own families, and or those that are very close to you, or perhaps even yourselves. So I want to acknowledge that and just say that I hope that you're well and that we continue to all be safe. I most certainly miss being in space with you and seeing your faces and being able to talk and connect as we typically do. But these are different times, of course. And so we are holding this meeting as a community meeting, but we're doing so virtually. And the goal is really to share information about the Restore, Reinvest, and Renew program. I always know that we call it the R3 program, and I'm very grateful for that because sometimes I get those words out of order. The R3 program reinvests 25% of the net tax revenues from adult use cannabis into communities that are most impacted by the war on drugs, over incarceration, and economic disinvestment. And as you all know, the R3 program's work is vitally important during these times. Many of the communities that are eligible for R3 funding have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, both in terms of deaths and economic impact. Over the past several weeks, I have reached out to leaders of many organizations that serve these communities. And these organizations are seeing community need rise dramatically, yet they're at the same time facing a great deal of financial uncertainty. This funding will be crucial for helping these groups to sustain and grow their programs. Now, over the past several months, my office's Justice, Equity, and Opportunity Initiative has been working very closely with our Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, or some of you may know it as ICEJA, to develop the R3 funding process. And I want you to know that the grant application will be released to the public on Monday, May 18th. And we are hosting this meeting because we want to make sure that community organizations have the information and resources that they need to submit a successful proposal. Toy Hutchinson, the senior advisor on cannabis control to Governor Pritzker, will discuss her role in the legislative history of the R3 program, and she'll be joining us later in the call. Quentin Williams, the criminal justice campaign manager at the Heartland Alliance, will discuss R3's restorative approach and how the R3 program can address community need. Including community expertise in this process is incredibly important to me. As a fellow restorative justice practitioner and advocate, I've often said that the wisdom is in the room, as we say in the RJ world. And so it's from the understanding that communities know the needs and they are the ones that are best to express the needs. So Quentin is an expert both because of his lived experience with the criminal justice system and as a sociology PhD candidate at Loyola. Lastly, Quinn Rollins, who is the director of our Justice, Equity, and Opportunity Initiative, will discuss eligibility for R3 funding, the application process, and available resources for applicants. So I just want to thank all of you for being here today. I'm incredibly excited about this opportunity. I am aware that it was legislators and community organizations and residents all across our state who fought for the R3 program. And I am so excited that we are at the point where this application process will open on Monday. Please know, and I want to say to all of you directly, that we are intent on ensuring that R3 funding is accessible to communities, and we look forward to partnering with you in this work. I'm now going to hand the presentation off to Quentin Williams.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor Stratton, for your leadership on this particular issue and ensuring that communities get what they need. Also want to thank Quinn and Toy Hutchison for their leadership as well. Again, my name is Quentin Williams, and I was born and raised on the west side of Chicago in the Humboldt Park neighborhood. And in my late teens, and I would say most of my 20s, I was in and out of correctional control of some sort: jail, prison, probation, parole, supervision. And I must say that with all that's going on with legalization of cannabis, it's kind of a surreal moment for me as I walk past, quote, legitimate businesses that are selling a product that I lost so much of my life to under correctional control. And I know that the hundreds of thousands of individuals, men and women, with records in Illinois are also, that irony is not lost on them. Thousands or hundreds of thousands who were punished and continue to be punished long after their sentence from the myriad laws and the social stigma that comes from the mark of a criminal record. But thankfully, through the help of others and great support and resources, it is now my life's work to advocate and be a part of the creation of policies and programs that are designed to free those most marginalized. As the Lieutenant Governor said, I am now completing my PhD in sociology from Loyola University Chicago, examining the role of housing instability, one of the many issues that people with record face: housing instability and the role that housing instability plays on various reentry outcomes. Now, I want to be clear that my success is not to be taken as if I am the exception. There are thousands of justice involved individuals in Illinois who, under the right conditions, will thrive in their own unique way if given the opportunity. Thus, a way to create those conditions is to funnel resources into communities that have been most impacted by policies stemming from the war on drugs and overcriminalization of our communities. It is not only necessary and just, but it is urgent. If we are serious about stopping violence, about stopping the inflow of into correctional facilities and creating lasting economic opportunity for people, we must unlock people from those invisible and visible chains. And we have to purposefully direct these funds to right the wrongs of the past. I will end my remarks with a quote from one of my favorite books on inequality that I use when I teach my students, called Rigging the Game by Michael Schwalbe. And he says this: he says that inequality is not an accident, but it is an accomplishment. In other words, it is something that human beings create. He goes on to say that it is the result of an imbalanced flow of resources. So I say to us today, the good news about that statement is that if inequality is something that we create, it is something that we can dismantle and recreate. And if inequality is the result of an imbalanced flow of resources, we have an opportunity to balance that flow of resources and redistribute them in an equitable and just way. Now I'll pass it over to Quinn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Quentin, and thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor, for your leadership, and Quinn for your leadership and your wisdom. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you to talk about implementation and how we ultimately carry out the values that Lieutenant Governor Stratton spoke about and Quinn mentioned. When I was a community organizer, we would often talk about power and what it means to build power at the community level. Power means to be able to, for me, that is the spirit of this R3 program. It allows community to have the power and ability to address violence, poverty, unemployment, mass incarceration, and many things that are the residue from the failed war on drugs and economic disinvestment. And so, with this spirit in mind, immediately after the legislation was signed, we began to go to work. We knew that the money could go towards five things: economic development, violence prevention, youth development, reentry, and civil legal aid. So we began to ask ourselves two essential questions. The first question is, what does equity look like in terms of space? And the second question is, what does equity look like in terms of place? What do I mean by that? How do we ensure that communities who are most impacted throughout the state by the war on drugs historically are prioritized, often Black and Brown communities? And how do we ensure that even within those specific communities, we support the very blocks, the very streets, and impacted hot spots, if you will, that need the most resources and most support? So let's talk about equity in terms of space, in terms of what we've done. As many of you all may know, there are about 3,000 census tracts in Illinois, and we sought to determine which ones had been the most disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. We had a working group of diverse researchers examine the factors that were mentioned: unemployment, poverty, incarceration, and gun injury. And they landed on about 750 census tracts throughout Illinois. They're all over the state, from Chicago to Cairo, Rockford to Rock Island, Danville to Decatur. And the board, including legislators and agency directors, approved these communities as those eligible for the R3 fund. Equity and space didn't just stop there. Our board and our researchers had to decide ultimately how funding would be weighted. And again, our team went back and examined each of these census tracts to assess how many people were residing in these areas. What's the density, if you will, in terms of impact? Because we know there's more people being impacted by poverty, gun injuries, violence, etc. They're going to need more resources if we're serious about funding it from an equity perspective. So the board weighted funding based upon population density in these areas, meaning that, for example, if 10% of the people living in these areas live there, then 10% of the funds should go there. We didn't stop there. Equity in space also means looking at allocation. And so we did more work, and our team recommended to the board that there not be one lump sum for the entirety of Cook County, or one lump sum for the collars and one lump sum for the rest of the state. We decided that we needed to carve out funding for several geographic regions, because we know that the context of the problems that exist in Austin look different from Auburn and Gresham, and Danville looks different than Decatur. So we've divided the funds in multiple geographic zones, if you will. And on Monday, when the grant application goes live, you'll be able to see the max funding levels for each of these geographic regions throughout the state. The second question was about equity in place. First, we know that it doesn't do our communities justice to suggest that everyone is being impacted the same. That's not what we mean by equity. Even within communities who have been impacted, some areas have 10% unemployment rate, others have 50% unemployment rate. It was staggering looking at the numbers. So the board has approved hot spots, if you will, for census tracts that had the highest of the highest rates of those factors that we've mentioned. And you'll be able to see that when the application goes live on Monday. Second, we know that communities have the best understanding of their needs to address these harms. So the board approved that applications from community members would be given priority if they are submitted by organizations with residency in these R3 areas. There will also be an assessment of whether or not the majority of an organization's employees actually live within these R3 zones, because we want to encourage local employment. Third, in terms of equity and split in space, we allow for flexibility in ideas. We decided that an organization could decide to address all of the issues in terms of violence prevention, economic development, et cetera, or they could decide that they just wanted to address one of the issues. It didn't matter. We also decided that the majority of the service grants, the majority of the money should go towards the actual services and programming. So, we is flexibility for organizations that say want to build a decide they want to launch a new after school math program. The majority of the funding is going towards service grants. But the second piece is that for organizations or communities that haven't necessarily decided what it is they want to do or fleshed out their ideas, a small portion of the funds will be used for strategic planning for communities that want to think about the new innovative ideas that they want to have baked. Fourth, in terms of equity in place and really getting to the nitty gritty of the application. Who can apply? Eligible organizations include nonprofits, local units of government, faith-based organizations, businesses, and other community organizations. How can you apply? Well, there are mainly two ways. You can apply as an individual or you can apply as a collaborative. As an individual, you have to be what's called GATA compliant, as many of you all know. GATA stands for our Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, which is required essentially for all state grants. We've built out a website to ensure that this process is as accessible as possible. So if you go to r3.illinois.gov and click on eligibility, you can click the GATA grantee portal to become eligible for GATA if you already aren't. Now, from an equity standpoint, we consistently hear from community-based organizations and residents that they often haven't been able to comply with GATA. And our board and our thought leaders thought about how we could help to support organizations that were thinking about this. First thing that we've done is we've built a technical assistance training to help communities and organizations get GATA compliant. It's available now. You can contact our Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, or you can go to the r3.illinois.gov website and click on Technical Assistance Training to get more information. You can request a training for your organization or your community. We're available at your service. But second, we know that some organizations may never be GATA compliant, especially during these trying times. So we've ensured that if you cannot get GATA compliant, there is another opportunity for you to apply as a part of a collaborative, meaning that you can work with a nonprofit, or you can work with a business, or you can work with a church that is GATA compliant or has the capacity to get GATA compliant and apply as a part of a collaborative. The spirit of the legislation wants to encourage collaboration amongst community members. And so we fostered a process and an application that encourages that. Although the primary applicant must be GATA compliant, your particular organization or business does not have to. So that's 4 in terms of equity in place. Fifth, in terms of equity in place, is time. So traditionally, applications under the GATA laws must be out for about 30 days. We've doubled that time to 60 days currently. That's what the board has approved. So the no-fault time period will essentially go from May 18th to about July 20th. And we are availing ourselves and our website to support you all with the questions that you may have. If you have questions about this process, please continue to reach out follow us on social media for information, or you can email us at uh, two different email addresses that could be helpful. One is cja.r3service@illinois.gov. If you're interested in applying for a service grant, that's cja.r3service@illinois.gov, or you can contact cja.r3planning@illinois.gov. You're interested in if you're interested in doing strategic planning. Again, that's cja.r3planning@illinois.gov. As the Lieutenant Governor said, we always believe that wisdom is in the room. And for me, part of this journey is about how we empower our communities to rewrite the harm, repair the harm that's been done. And we're excited about going on this journey with you all. With that, I'll pass it to Sharice Williams, who we're excited is our current Chief of Staff at the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, comes from a community background, and is also availing herself at your service.
Thank you, Quinn, and thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for your leadership throughout this program. I will now answer a series of questions and answers. We received quite a few Q&As. All of these Q&As will also be available via the website at r3.illinois.gov. So I will just begin reading the questions and providing the answers that we have thus far. Question 1, will grantees have to limit services to persons living in the eligible census tracts, or can they simply make those census tracts the focus of service delivery? The answer, programs must serve community residents within the eligible areas, but clients in neighboring census tracts should not be denied services. Question 2, it is difficult to formulate questions before the RFP is public. Will there be ongoing opportunities to seek information once the RFP is posted? Yes. There will be a process for submitting questions during the grant application period. An email address for questions will be provided. All substantive questions and responses will be posted at r3.illinois.gov/FAQs. Question 3. Downstate civil legal aid organizations cover large geographic regions. For example, within the Prairie State Legal Services 36 county region, there are 160 locations in 23 counties identified as R3 zones. Can a single application include multiple zones? If we wanted to place designated staff in, let's say, Kankakee, Rockford, Peoria, and Joliet, would we need to submit separate applications? The answer, all zones fall into funding regions. Applicant organizations may propose to serve multiple zones as long as the zones are located within a single funding region. Applicant organizations proposing to serve zones in more than one funding region must submit separate applications for each region. Question 4. Our building is not directly in a zone, but on the other side of the street from a zone. Would we be eligible to serve any client in our facility or only clients who reside in that zone? Answer, to be eligible for funding, an R3 program must be centered around an R3 zone. If your building is located just outside of an R3 zone, but many of your clients are from that zone, then you may provide your program services to clients who need them regardless of their residence inside the particular R3 zone. However, any outreach activities, advertising, or marketing geared towards reaching new clients should occur within the R3 zone. In your application, you should explain the situation and demonstrate that a significant portion of your client base will be from the R3 zone in order to be deemed eligible for R3 funding. Question 5. In that case, would my agency be eligible for local preference points for being in an R3 zone? The answer is no. In order to receive local preference points based on your organization's address, the address needs to be within the R3 zone. However, you could still have local preference points based on the residence of your employees if at least half of them live within an R3 zone, or if you are in a collaborative with other organizations, which at least half of them are within an R3 zone. In any case, you would still be eligible to apply for funding, regardless of whether you receive the local preference points. 6. Will there be any assistance toward writing the grants for community assessments and planning and service delivery programs? Answer is yes. ICEJA will be hosting 3 webinars on May 19th, 20th, and 21 to assist potential applicants. Webinar information will be included in the notice of funding opportunity. Applicants with limited experience in applying for state grants also are encouraged to take a grant technical assistance workshop, which could be found on the R3 website. Workshops provide an overview of the state grant process and what it means to comply with the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, otherwise known as GATA. GATA was created to ensure a coordinated, transparent process for efficient oversight of grant recipient selection and monitoring. For more information or to register for a workshop, go to r3illinois.gov and click the technical assistance at the top right of the page. I just received a few more questions. Some of these are a little repetitive of what Quinn just said, but I think it may be helpful. Another question. What type of organizations can apply for R3 grants? So to repeat, organizations that are eligible for R3 funding must be based in or serve residents of designated eligible R3 areas. Organizations eligible to apply for this funding are nonprofits, local units of governments, and religious organizations. Other type of organizations like businesses and community or neighborhood associations are also eligible to apply as members of a collaborative. Is funding renewed annually for approved applicants, or will they need to reapply? Grant awards resulting from this opportunity will have a target period of performance of 9 months, September 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. Additional funding of up to 24 months may be awarded after the initial funding period based on successful performance and availability of funds. What are the determinants for R3 designated areas? There are over 3,100 census tracts in the state, and ICEJA has identified 509 eligible areas for the R3 program. Areas were identified using community-level data on gun injury, child poverty, unemployment, and state prison commitments and returns, combined with the disproportionately impacted areas identified by the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, otherwise known as DCEO. How can people find out if the area the organization provides services to is an R3 eligible zone? ICEJA has provided an interactive map, which will be live on Monday, May 18th, for reference of the eligible areas designated for the Restore, Reinvest, Renew, otherwise known as R3 program grant funding. Residents can access the map by visiting the r3.illinois.gov. What options do people have if their application is rejected? Answer: unsuccessful applicants may request a formal appeal of the evaluation process via and submitted within 14 calendar days after the date the grant award notice is published, or receipt of a funding opportunity declination letter from ICEJA, whichever was received first. A briefing may be requested for feedback using the evaluation and review criteria. Requests for debriefings must be made via email and submitted within 7 calendar days after receipt of notice. Question number 6. This question is a repeat from a previous question, asking if there would be assistance for organizations that need help writing and securing state grant funding. To repeat that, ICEJA will host a webinar on the May 19th, 20th, and 21st. 7th question. Where can people go online to find the R3 Notices of Funding Opportunity, otherwise known as a NOFO? Starting on May 18th, residents can visit the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority's website to access the R3 Notice of Funding Opportunity at r3.illinois.gov. And if you have any other questions, please visit the website. All these questions will be posted on the FAQs under the website, so you are able to go back and refer to any of these questions and answers. Thank you, and back to Quinn.
Thank you, Sharice. We want to thank you all for being here. Another piece I would add is that we think equity is a part of the review of the applications that you will submit. And one of the pieces that we've built in is ensuring that local community residents are part of those review committees to review those applications. We're working to ensure that those who are viewing those applications receive training as well around cultural competency and unconscious buying. These are things that we thought were important. I know Toy can't be here right now. She's caught up in a meeting. But I know if she was here, she would say a few things. One is that these ideas came from the ground, from community organizations. Many ways, a few years ago, there was a dialogue between legislators and community organizations about what it meant to shift from purely punitive approaches around criminal justice to restorative ones where we start to repair the harm and reinvest. And the legalization of cannabis was a wonderful opportunity to ensure that we had the most equity-centric law in the country. So we thank you. We look forward to working with you, and we're excited to walk this journey. Thank you all.